the timeless charm of the real hero. The wisdom of books and the excitement of your well-being. Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Together, we shall create a harmonious community, bound by shared passions and a desire to elevate the human experience. Sebastian Saint's awakening smiles will be there, to the end of the line, my Valentine, guiding you on this journey towards a more serene and enlightened tomorrow. Catch you guys on the flip side.
I was shocked. I'm not gonna lie.
Let's see. Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Greetings, children. It is I, your obedient servant, Sebastian St. Smalls. The plan for this one is, if it goes right, Street Fighter V and Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. You know what I'm doing, Miss Kenton? I'm placing my thoughts elsewhere while you chatter away. Haha. Anyways, thanks so much for swinging by. Wish us luck.
The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. In memory of Mrs. Lenore Marshall. Prologue times July 1956. Darlington Hall. It seems increasingly likely that I really will undertake the expedition that has been preoccupying my imagination now for some days. An expedition, I should say, which I will undertake alone in the comfort of Mr. Fielding's ward. An expedition which has, I foresee, will take me through much of the West Countryside of England to the West Country.
see your future. Wanna know who wins?
Whether my employer has entered carrying a few volumes, which we presumably wish returned to the shelves. On seeing that person, we took the opportunity to inform you that we had just left. Roman Allies plans to return to the United States for a period of being weeks between August and September. Having made this announcement, my employer put his volumes down on a table, seated himself on the chaiselong, and stretched out his legs. It was. You realize, Stevens, I don't expect you to be locked up here in this house all the time I'm away. Why don't you take the car and drive us somewhere for a few days? You look like you could make good use of a break. Coming out of the blue as it did, I did not quite know how to reply to such a suggestion. I recall thanking him for his consideration, but quite probably I did nothing to make me
Using their main character.
Stevens, I really think you should take a break. I'll put the bill for the gas. You fellows, you're always locked up in these big
Have you
houses
considered
helping
your
out.
destiny?
How do you ever
Round
get
one.
around this?
Fight.
Country of yours. This was the first time my employer raised the session. When this seems to be something which genuinely on this occasion, in fact, the cry of swords occurred to me as I stood up there on the ladder and was trying to leave the meeting up. Professionally, I did not see a great deal of the congregation. The sense of twin exercise and position in correct sight. How did when the little unusually decolled order. What had occurred was this. Once the transactions were over, transactions which had taken this house out of the hands of the Darlington family after 2 centuries, Mr. Faraday let it be known that he would not be taking up immediate further but would further 4 months to taking up.
You are close to ranking in
In the
the
meantime,
top
however, he
5,000
was most keen
in
to still of his
North America.
predecessor, a stir of which he had heard high praise be retained at Darlington Hall. This stir he referred to as, of course, nothing more than the skeleton team of 6 kept on by Lord Darlington's relatives to administer to the house up to and
My iron body is invincible, so beware!
Once the purchase
Round
was
1.
completed,
Fight.
it was little I could do for Mr. Faraday. But Mrs.
Round 2. Fight. Muscle power for you!
I'm in trouble.
You win!
Such losses were kept to a minimum. Recording a time when I had a skill of 17 annually, and learning how not so long. The goal skill of 28 had been known for a year and a half. 4. The idea of devising a skill plan by which the same house would be run on a skill of 13, to say the least, daunting. Although I did my best not to, something of my
He didn't want a rematch?
have betrayed itself.
I wonder why.
Reassurance that were it to prove necessary, then an additional member of staff could be hired. But he would be much obliged, he repeated, if I could give it a go before. Now naturally, like many of us, I have a reluctance to change to much of the old ways. But there is no virtue at all in clinging as some do much of the old ways. Now, repeated, if I could give it a go before. Now naturally, like many of us, I have a reluctance to change to much of the old ways. But there is no virtue at all in clinging as some due to tradition newly born saints stargate. In this age of electricity and modern heating systems, there is no need at all to employ the sorts of numbers necessary even a generation ago. Indeed, it has actually been an idea of mine for some time that the retaining of unnecessary numbers simply for tradition's sake, resulting in employees having an unhealthy amount of time on their hands, has been an important factor in the sharp decline in professional standards. Furthermore, Mr. Faraday had made it clear that he planned to hold only very rarely the sort of large social occasions Darlington Hall had seen frequently in the past. I did then go about the task Mr. Faraday had set me with some dedication. I spent many hours working on the plan, and at least as many hours again thinking about it as I went about other duties for I lay awake after retiring. Whenever I believed I had come up with something, I probed it for every sort of oversight, tested it through from all angles. Finally, I came up with a plan which, while perhaps not exactly as Mr. Faraday had requested, was the best, I felt sure. That was humanly possible. Almost all the attractive parts of the house would remain operative, the extensive servants' quarters, including the back corridor, the 2 still rooms and the old laundry, and the guest corridor up on the second floor would be dust sheeted, leaving all the main ground floor rooms and a generous number of guest rooms. Admittedly, our present team of 4 will manage this program only with reinforcement from some daily workers. Meister Plan therefore took in the services of a gardener to visit once a week, twice in the summer, and 2 cleaners, each to visit twice a week. Mr. Plan would, furthermore, point to the 4 resident employees mean a radical altering of our respective customary duties. The 2 young girls, I predicted, would not only such changes so difficult to accommodate, but I did all I could to see that Mrs. Clemens showed the least adjustments, to the extent that I undertook for myself a number of duties which you may consider most broad-minded of a butler to do. Even now, I would not go so far as to say it is a bad plan. After all, it enables us to afford to cover an unexpected amount of ground. But you will no doubt agree that the very best plans are those which give clear margins of error to allow for those days when an employee is ill or for one reason or another below par. In this particular case, of course, I had been set a slightly extraordinary task, but I had nevertheless not been neglectful to incorporate margins wherever possible. I was especially conscious that any resistance there may be on the part of Mrs. Clemens, or the 2 girls, to the taking on of duties beyond their traditional boundaries, would be compounded by any notion that their workloads had greatly increased. I had then, over those days of struggling with the plan, expended a significant amount of thought to ensuring that Mrs. Clemens and the girls, once they had got over their aversion to adopting these more eclectic roles, would indeed a division of duties stimulating and unburdensome. I fear, however, that in my anxiety to win the support of Mrs. Clemens and the girls, I did not perhaps assess quite as stringently my own limitations, and although my experience and customary caution in such matters prevented my giving myself more than I could actually carry out, I was perhaps negligent over this question, and allowed myself the margin. It is not surprising then, if I have said so. But this oversight should reveal itself in these small but telling ways. In the end, I believe the matter to be no more complicated than this. I had given myself too much to do.
Round 1.
You may be amazed that such an immense shortcoming to a plan should have continued to take priorities, but then we will agree that such is often the way with matters one must be abiding. During a period of time, one is not struck by the true criteria, often quite accidentally by some external event. So it was in this instance, that is to say, my receiving the letter from him. Continuing to think along with his long, rather unrevealing passages, my mistake almost felt that they died before, when I had quite sure of his distinct hints of criticizing and flight. Literacy might be quite bring myself to it. The title again of Mr. Fluid. There were various aspects to the matter I felt I needed to clarify to myself before proceeding further. There was, for instance, the question of cost. For taking into account my employer's generous thought it would be. Feel for that, such a trip might still come to. Surprising amount considering such matters as accommodation, meals, and any small snacks I might partake of on my way. Then, there was the question of what sorts of costume were appropriate on such a journey, and whether or not it was worth my while to invest in a new set of clothes. I am in the possession of a number of splendid suits, probably passed on to me over the years by Lord Darlington himself, and by various guests who have stayed in this house and had reason to be pleased with the standard of service. Here, one of these suits are, perhaps, too formal for the purposes of a proposed trip, or else rather old-fashioned birthday. Then there is one lounge suit, passed on to me in 1931 or 1932. Services were practically brand new at the time of all those things. Might well be appropriate for me. Lounge residing in a very guest house is my work. What I do not possess, however, is any suitable traveling clothes. That is to say, those in which I might be seen driving the car, unless I were to don a silk hat or a young Lord Chinese. During the war, which despite being very too small for me, might be considered ideal in terms of tone. I calculated only that right. Savings would be able to meet all the costs I might incur, and in addition, might stretch the purchase of a new costume. I hope you do not think me unduly with regard to this last question, do you? Just as one moments when one might be obliged to be that. Let one say one is before, and it is important that one at such time in a manner worthy of one's position. During this time, I also spent many minutes examining the notes, atlas, and perusing also the relevant volumes of Mrs. Simpson. Remember the viewer. If you are not familiar with Mrs. Simpson's books, a series running to 7 volumes, each one concentrating on one region of the British Empire contemplated. Then, were written during the 30s, but much of it will still be active. Yet after all, I do not imagine German bonds have altered our countryside so silently.
I shall present you with
The most popular as far as sister were concerned due to the kind appreciation she never shied from showing. Then, I did have a natural admiration for the lady that I had. I was too taken to perusing her volumes in the library whenever I had an odd moment. Indeed, I recall that shortly after Miss Clinton's departure to Cornwall in 1936, myself never having been to that part of the country, I would often glance through volume 3 of Mrs. Simmons's work, the volume which describes to readers the delights of Devon and Cornwall, complete with photographs sent to her mind even more evocative a variety of artists' sketches of that region. It was thus that I had been able to gain some sense of the sort of place Miss Benson had to live her married life. But this was, as I say, back in the 30s, when, as I understand, Mrs. Simmons's books were being admired in houses up and down the country. I had not looked through those volumes for many years, until these recent developments led me to get down from the shelf the Devon and Cornwall volume once more. I studied all over again those marvelous descriptions and illustrations, and you can understand
My growing excitement at the notion that I might now actually undertake a motoring trip myself around that same part of the country. It seemed in the end there was little else to do but actually raise the matter again with Mr. Faraday.
This one. Capture. Oh.
My growing excitement at the notion that I might now
Oh, I see. Let's go. Video capture. Okay. Did I fix it on the fly? Bennett fixed the tech problem. Ongoing on the fly.
There was always the possibility, of course, that his suggestion of a fortnight ago may have been a whim of the moment, and he would no longer be approving of the idea. But from my observation of Mr. Faraday over these months, he is not one of those gentlemen prone to that most irritating of traits in an employer inconsistency. There was no reason to believe he would not be as enthusiastic as before about my proposed motoring trip, indeed, that he would not repeat his most kind or to foot the bill for the gas. Nevertheless, I considered most carefully what might be the most opportune occasion to bring the matter up with him, for although I would not for one moment, as I say, suspect Mr. Faraday of inconsistency, it nevertheless made sense not to broach the topic when he was preoccupied or distracted. A refusal in such circumstances may well not reach my employer's true feelings on the matter, but once having sustained such a dismissal, I could not easily bring it up again. It was clear, then, that I had to choose my moment wisely. In the end, I decided the most prudent moment in the day would be as I served afternoon tea in the drawing room. Mr. Faraday will usually have just returned from his short walk on the downs at that point, so he is rarely engrossed in his reading or writing as he tends to be in the evenings. In fact, when I bring in the afternoon tea, Mr. Faraday is inclined to close any book or periodical he has been reading, rise and stretch out his arms in front of the windows, as though in anticipation of conversation with me. As it was, I believe my judgment proved quite sound on the question of timing. The fact that things turned out as they did is entirely attributable to an error of judgment in another direction altogether. That is to say, I did not take sufficient account of the fact that at that time of the day, what Mr. Faraday enjoys is a conversation of a light-hearted, humorous sort. Knowing this to be his likely mood when I brought in the tea yesterday afternoon, and being aware of his general propensity to talk with me in a bantering tone at such moments, it would certainly have been wiser not to have mentioned Miss Kenton at all. But you will perhaps understand that there was a natural tendency on my part, in asking what was, after all, a generous favor from my employer, to hint that there was a good professional motive behind my request. So it was that in indicating my reasons for preferring the West Country for my motoring, instead of leaving it at mentioning several of the alluring details as conveyed by Mrs. Simmons's volume, I made the error of declaring that a former housekeeper of Darlington Hall was resident in that region. I suppose I must have been intending to explain to Mr. Faraday how I would thus be able to explore an option which might prove the ideal solution to our present small problems here in this house. It was only after I had mentioned Miss Kenton that I suddenly realized how entirely inappropriate it would be for me to continue. Not only was I unable to be certain of Miss Kenton's desire to rejoin the stir here, I had not, of course, even discussed the question of additional stir with Mr. Faraday since that RST preliminary meeting over a year ago. To have continued pronouncing aloud my thoughts on the future of Darlington Hall would have been, to say the very least, presumptuous. I suspect, then, that I paused rather abruptly and looked a little awkward. In any case, Mr. Faraday seized the opportunity to grin broadly at me, and say with some deliberation, My, Stevens, a lady friend, and at your age. This was a most embarrassing situation, one in which Lord Darlington would never have placed an employee. But then I do not mean to imply anything derogatory about Mr. Faraday. He is, after all, an American gentleman, and his ways are often very drint. There is no question at all that he meant any harm, but you will no doubt appreciate how uncomfortable a situation this was for me. I'd never have girded you for such a ladies' man, Stevens, he went on. Keeps the spirit young, I guess. But then I really don't No, it's right for me to be helping you with such dubious assignations. Naturally, I felt the temptation to deny immediately and unambiguously such motivations as my employer was imputing to me, but saw in time that to do so would be to rise to Mr. Faraday's bait, and the situation would only become increasingly embarrassing. I therefore continued to stand there awkwardly, waiting for my employer to give me permission to undertake the motoring trip. Embarrassing as those moments were for me, I would not wish to imply that I in any way blame Mr. Faraday, who is in no sense an unkind person. He was, I am sure, merely enjoying the sort of bantering which in the United States, no doubt, is a sign of a good, friendly understanding between employer and employee, indulged in as a kind of affectionate sport. Indeed, to put things into a proper perspective, I should point out that just such bantering on my new employer's part has characterized much of our relationship over these months, though I must confess, I remain rather unsure as to how I should respond. In fact, during my RST days under Mr. Faraday, I was once or twice quite astounded by some of the things he would say to me. For instance, I once had occasion to ask him if a certain gentleman expected at the house was likely to be accompanied by his wife. God help us if she does come, Mr. Faraday replied. Maybe you could keep her on our hands, Stevens. Maybe you could take her out to one of those stables around Mr. Morgan's farm. Keep her entertained in all that hay.
You want to listen to the book?
She may be just your type.
Remains of the Day.
For a moment or two, I had not an idea what my employer was saying. Then I realized he was making some sort of joke and endeavored to smile appropriately, though I suspect some residue of my bewilderment, not to say shock, remained detectable in my expression. Over the following days, however, I came to learn not to be surprised by such remarks from my employer, and would smile in the correct manner whenever I detected the bantering tone in his voice. Nevertheless, I could never be sure exactly what was required of me on these occasions. Perhaps I was expected to laugh heartily, or indeed reciprocate with some remark of my own. This last possibility is one that has given me some concern over these months, and is something about which I still feel undecided. For it may well be that in America, it is all part of what is considered good professional service that an employee provide entertaining banter. In fact, I remember Mr. Simpson, the landlord of the Plowman's Arms, saying once that were he an American bartender, he would not be chatting to us in that friendly, but ever courteous manner of his, but instead would be assaulting us with crude references to our vices and failings, calling us drunks and all manner of such names, in his attempt to fill the role expected of him by his customers. And I recall also some years ago, Mr. Rain, who travelled to America as valet to Sir Reginald Movies, remarking that a taxi driver in New York regularly addressed his fare in a manner which, if repeated in London, would end in some sort of fracas, if not in the fellow being frog-marched to the nearest police station. It is quite possible, then, that my employer fully expects me to respond to his bantering in a like manner, and considers my failure to do so a form of negligence. This is, as I say, a matter which has given me much concern. But I must say this business of bantering is not a duty I feel I can ever discharge with enthusiasm. It is all very well, in these changing times, to adapt one's work to take in duties not traditionally within one's realm, but bantering is of another dimension altogether. For one thing, how would one know for sure that at any given moment a response of the bantering sort is truly what is expected? One need hardly dwell on the catastrophic possibility of uttering a bantering remark only to discover it wholly inappropriate. I did though on one occasion not long ago pluck up the courage to attempt the required sort of reply. I was serving Mr. Faraday morning coffee in the breakfast room when he had said to me, "I suppose it wasn't you making that crowing noise this morning, Stevens." My employer was referring, I realized, to a pair of gypsies gathering unwanted iron who had passed by earlier making their customary calls. As it happened, I had that same morning been giving thought to the dilemma of whether or not I was expected to reciprocate my employer's bantering, and had been seriously worried at how he might be viewing my repeated failure to respond to such openings. I therefore set about thinking of some witty reply, some statement which would still be safely inoffensive in the event of my having misjudged the situation. After a moment or two, I said, "More like swallows than crows, I would have said, sir, from the migratory aspect." And I followed this with a suitably modest smile, to indicate without ambiguity that I had made a witticism, since I did not wish Mr. Faraday to restrain any spontaneous mirth he felt, out of a misplaced respectfulness. Mr. Faraday, however, simply looked up at me and said, "I beg your pardon, Stevens." Only then did it occur to me that, of course, my witticism would not be easily appreciated by someone who was not aware that it was gypsies who had passed by. I could not see, then, how I might press on with this bantering. In fact, I decided it best to call a halt to the matter and, pretending to remember something I had urgently to attend to, excused myself, leaving my employer looking rather bemused. It was, then, a most discouraging start to what may in fact be an entirely new sort of duty required of me, so discouraging that I must admit I have not really made further attempts along these lines. But, at the same time, I cannot escape the feeling that Mr. Faraday is not satisfied with my responses to his various banterings. Indeed, his increased persistence of late may even be my employer's way of urging me all the more to respond in a like-minded spirit. Be that as it may, since that RST witticism concerning the gypsies, I have not been able to think of other such witticisms quickly enough. Such difficulties as these tend to be all the more preoccupying nowadays because one does not have the means to discuss and corroborate views with one's fellow professionals in the way one once did. Not so long ago, if any such points of ambiguity arose regarding one's duties, one had the comfort of knowing that before long some fellow professional whose opinion one respected would be accompanying his employer to the house, and there would be ample opportunity to discuss the matter. And of course, in Lord Darlington's days, when ladies and gentlemen would often visit for many days on end, it was possible to develop a good understanding with visiting colleagues. Indeed, in those busy days, our servants' hall would often witness a gathering of some of the nest professionals in England talking late into the night by the warmth of the re. And let me tell you, if you were to have come into our servants' hall on any of those evenings, you would not have heard mere gossip. More likely, you would have witnessed debates over the great airs preoccupying our employers upstairs, or else over matters of import reported in the newspapers, and of course, as fellow professionals from all walks of life are wont to do when gathered together, we could be found discussing every aspect of our vocation. Sometimes, naturally, there would be strong disagreements, but more often than not, the atmosphere was dominated by a feeling of mutual respect. Perhaps I will convey a better idea of the tone of those evenings if I say that regular visitors included the likes of Mr. Harry Graham, valet butler to Sir James Chambers, and Mr. John Donalds, valet to Mr. Sidney Dickinson. And there were others less distinguished, perhaps, but whose lively presence made any visit memorable. For instance, Mr. Wilkinson, valet butler to Mr. John Campbell, with his well-known repertoire of impersonations of prominent gentlemen, Mr. Davidson from Easterley House, whose passion in debating a point could at times be as alarming to a stranger as his simple kindness at all other times was endearing, Mr. Herman, valet to Mr. John Henry Peters, whose extreme views no one could listen to passively, but whose distinctive belly laugh and Yorkshire charm made him impossible to dislike. I could go on. There existed in those days a true camaraderie in our profession, whatever the small differences in our approach. We were all essentially cut from the same cloth, so to speak. Not the way it is today, when on the rare occasion an employee accompanies a guest here, he is likely to be some Newcomer who has little to say about anything other than association football, and who prefers to pass the evening not by the re of the servants' hall, but drinking at the Ploughman's Arms or, indeed, as seems increasingly likely nowadays, at the Star Inn. I mentioned a moment ago Mr. Graham, the valet butler to Sir James Chambers. In fact, some 2 months ago, I was most happy to learn that Sir James was to visit Darlington Hall. I looked forward to the visit not only because visitors from Lord Darlington's days are most rare now, Mr. Faraday's circle, naturally, being quite different from his lordship's, but also because I presumed Mr. Graham would accompany Sir James as of old, and I would thus be able to get his opinion on this question of bantering. I was, then, both surprised and disappointed to discover a day before the visit that Sir James would be coming alone. Furthermore, during Sir James's subsequent stay, I gathered that Mr. Graham was no longer in Sir James's employ, indeed that Sir James no longer employed any full-time stir at all. I would like to have discovered what had become of Mr. Graham, for although we had not known each other well, I would say we had got on those occasions we had met. As it was, however, no suitable opportunity arose for me to gain such information. I must say, I was rather disappointed, for I would like to have discussed the bantering question with him. However, let me return to my original thread. I was obliged, as I was saying, to spend some uncomfortable minutes standing in the drawing room yesterday afternoon while Mr. Faraday went about his bantering. I responded as usual by smiling slightly Susie and at least to indicate that I was participating in some way with the good-humouredness with which he was carrying on, and waited to see if my employer's permission regarding the trip would be forthcoming. As I had anticipated, he gave his kind permission after not too great a delay, and furthermore, Mr. Faraday was good enough to remember and reiterate his generous offer to foot the bill for the gas. So then, there seems little reason why I should not undertake my motoring trip to the West Country. I would of course have to write to Miss Kenton to tell her I might be passing by. I would also need to see to the matter of the costumes. Various other questions concerning arrangements here in the house during my absence will need to be settled. But all in all, I can see no genuine reason why I should not undertake this trip. Day 1 times evening. Salisbury. Tonight, I ND myself here in a guest house in the city of Salisbury. The RST day of my trip is now completed, and all in all, I must say I am quite satisfied. This expedition began this morning almost an hour later than I had planned, despite my having completed my packing and loaded the fort with all necessary items well before 8 o'clock. What with Mrs. Clements and the girls also gone for the week, I suppose I was very conscious of the fact that once I departed, Darlington Hall would stand empty for probably the RST time this century, perhaps for the RST time since the day it was built. It was an odd feeling, and perhaps accounts for why I delayed my departure so long, wandering around the house many times over, checking one last time that all was in order. It is hard to explain my feelings once I did now settle for the RST 20 minutes or so of motoring. I cannot say I was seized by any excitement or anticipation at all. This was due, no doubt, to the fact that though I motored further and further from the house, I continued to ND myself in surroundings with which I had at least a passing acquaintance. Now I had always supposed I had travelled very little, restricted as I am by my responsibilities in the house, but, of course, over time, one does make various excursions for one professional reason or another, and it would seem I have become much more acquainted with those neighbouring districts than I had realized. For as I say, as I motored on in the sunshine towards the Berkshire border, I continued to be surprised by the familiarity of the country around me. But then eventually the surroundings grew unrecognizable, and I knew I had gone beyond all previous boundaries. I have heard people describe the moment when setting sail in a ship, when one nowly loses sight of the land. I imagine the experience of unease mixed with exhilaration often described in connection with this moment is very similar to what I felt in the fort as the surroundings grew strange around me. This occurred just after I took a turning and found myself on a road curving around the edge of a hill. I could sense the steep drop to my left, though I could not see it due to the trees and thick foliage that lined the roadside. The feeling swept over me that I had truly left Darlington Hall behind, and I must confess I did feel a slight sense of alarm, a sense aggravated by the feeling that I was perhaps not on the correct road at all, but speeding in totally the wrong direction into a wilderness. It was only the feeling of a moment, but it caused me to slow down. And even when I had assured myself I was on the right road, I felt compelled to stop the car a moment to take stock, as it were. I decided to step out and stretch my legs a little, and when I did so, I received a stronger impression than ever of being perched on the side of a hill. On one side of the road, thickets and small trees rose steeply, while on the other I could now glimpse through the foliage the distant countryside. I believe I had walked a little way along the roadside, peering through the foliage hoping to get a better view, when I heard a voice behind me. Until this point, of course, I had believed myself quite alone, and I turned in some surprise. A little way further up the road on the opposite side, I could see the start of a footpath, which disappeared steeply up into the thickets. Sitting on the large stone that marked this spot was a thin, white-haired man in a cloth cap, smoking his pipe. He called to me again, and though I could not quite make out his words, I could see him gesturing for me to join him. For a moment, I took him for a vagrant, but then I saw he was just some local fellow enjoying the fresh air and summer sunshine, and saw no reason not to comply. "Just wondering, sir," he said, as I approached, "how your legs were." "I beg your pardon." The fellow gestured up the footpath. "You got to have a good pair of legs and a good pair of lungs to go up there. Me, I haven't got neither, so I stay down here. But if I was in better shape, I'd be sitting up there. There's a nice little spot up there, a bench and everything. And you won't get a better view anywhere in the whole of England." "If what you say is true," I said, "I think I'd rather stay here. I happen to be embarking on a motoring trip during the course of which I hope to see many splendid views. To see the best before I have properly begun would be somewhat premature." The fellow did not seem to understand me, for he simply said again, "You won't see a better view in the whole of England. But I tell you, you need a good pair of legs and a good pair of lungs." Then he added, "I can see you're in good shape for your age, sir. I'd say you could make your way up there, no trouble. I mean, even I can manage on a good day." I glanced up the path, which did look steep and rather rough. "I'm telling you, sir, you'll be sorry if you don't take a walk up there. And you never know. A couple more years and it might be too late." He gave a rather vulgar laugh. "Better go on up while you still can." It occurs to me now that the man might just possibly have meant this in a humorous sort of way, that is to say, he intended it as a bantering remark. But this morning, I must say, I found it quite offensive, and it may well have been the urge to demonstrate just how foolish his insinuation had been that caused me to set her up the footpath. In any case, I am very glad I did so. Certainly, it was quite a strenuous walk, though I can say it failed to cause me any real difficulty, the path rising in zigzags up the hillside for 100 yards or so. I then reached a small clearing, undoubtedly the spot the man had referred to. Here one was met by a bench and indeed by a most marvelous view over miles of the surrounding countryside. What I saw was principally ELD upon ELD rolling into the far distance. The land rose and fell gently, and the elds were bordered by hedges and trees. There were dots in some of the distant elds, which I assumed to be sheep. To my right, almost on the horizon, I thought I could see the square tower of a church. It was a any feeling indeed to be standing up there like that, with The sound of summer all around one and a light breeze on one's face. And I believe it was then, looking on that view, that I began, for the RST time, to adopt a frame of mind appropriate for the journey before me. For it was then that I felt the RST healthy rush of anticipation for the many interesting experiences I know these days ahead hold in store for me. And indeed, it was then that I felt a new resolve not to be daunted in respect to the one professional task I have entrusted myself with on this trip, that is to say, regarding Miss Kenton and our present stung problems. But that was this morning. This evening I myself settled here in this comfortable guest house in a street not far from the centre of Salisbury. It is, I suppose, a relatively modest establishment, but very clean and perfectly adequate for my needs. The landlady, a woman of around 40 or so, appears to regard me as a rather grand visitor on account of Mr. Faraday's Ford and the high quality of my suit. This afternoon I arrived in Salisbury at around 3:30 when I entered my address in her register as Darlington Hall. I could see her look at me with some trepidation, assuming no doubt that I was some gentleman used to such places as the Ritz or the Dorchester, and that I would storm out of her guest house on being shown my room. She informed me that a double room at the front was available, though I was welcome to it for the price of a single. I was then brought up to this room, in which, at that point of the day, the sun was lighting up the oral patterns of the wallpaper quite agreeably. There were twin beds and a pair of good-sized windows overlooking the street. On inquiring where the bathroom was, the woman told me in a timid voice that although it was the door facing mine, there would be no hot water available until after supper. I asked her to bring me up a pot of tea, and when she had gone, inspected the room further. The beds were perfectly clean and had been well made. The basin in the corner was also very clean. On looking out of the windows, one saw on the opposite side of the street a bakery displaying a variety of pastries, a chemist's shop and a barber's. Further along, one could see where the street passed over a round-backed bridge and on into more rural surroundings. I refreshed my face and hands with cold water at the basin, then seated myself on a hard-backed chair left near one of the windows to await my tea. I would suppose it was shortly after 4 o'clock that I left the guest house and ventured out into the streets of Salisbury. The wide, airy nature of the streets here give the city a marvelously spacious feel, so that I found it most easy to spend some hours just strolling in the gently warm sunshine. Moreover, I discovered the city to be one of many charms. Time and again, I found myself wandering past delightful rows of old timber-fronted houses, or crossing some little stone footbridge over one of the many streams that out through the city. And of course, I did not fail to visit the NE Cathedral, much praised by Mrs. Simmons in her volume. This august building was hardly difficult for me to locate, its looming spire being ever visible wherever one goes in Salisbury. Indeed, as I was making my way back to this guest house this evening, I glanced back over my shoulder on a number of occasions and was met each time by a view of the sun setting behind that great spire. And yet tonight, in the quiet of this room, I indeed that what really remains with me from this RST day's travel is not Salisbury Cathedral, nor any of the other charming sights of this city, but rather that marvelous view encountered this morning of the rolling English countryside. Now I am quite prepared to believe that other countries can have more obviously spectacular scenery. Indeed, I have seen in encyclopedias and the National Geographic magazine breathtaking photographs of sights from various corners of the globe, magnificent canyons and waterfalls, raggedly beautiful mountains. It has never, of course, been my privilege to have seen such things at RST hand, but I will nevertheless hazard this with some condense. The English landscape at its nest such as I saw it this morning possesses a quality that the landscapes of other nations, however more superficially dramatic, inevitably fail to possess. It is, I believe, a quality that will mark out the English landscape to any objective observer as the most deeply satisfying in the world, and this quality is probably best summed up by the term greatness. For it is true, when I stood on that high ledge this morning and viewed the land before me, I distinctly felt that rare, yet unmistakable feeling, the feeling that one is in the presence of greatness. We call this land of ours Great Britain, and there may be those who believe this a somewhat immodest practice. Yet I would venture that the landscape of our country alone would justify the use of this lofty adjective. And yet what precisely is this greatness? Just where, or in what, does it lie? I am quite aware it would take a far wiser head than mine to answer such a question, but if I were forced to hazard a guess, I would say that it is the very lack of obvious drama or spectacle that sets the beauty of our land apart. What is pertinent is the calmness of that beauty, its sense of restraint. It is as though the land knows of its own beauty, of its own greatness, and feels no need to shout it. In comparison, the sorts of sights heard in such places as Africa and America, though undoubtedly very exciting, would, I am sure, strike the objective viewer as inferior on account of their unseemly demonstrativeness. This whole question is very akin to the question that has caused much debate in our profession over the years: what is a great butler? I can recall many hours of enjoyable discussion on this topic around the re of the servants' hall at the end of a day. You will notice I say what rather than who is a great butler, for there was actually no serious dispute as to the identity of the men who set the standards amongst our generation. That is to say, I am talking of the likes of Mr. Marshall of Charlevel House, or Mr. Lane of Bridewood. If you have ever had the privilege of meeting such men, you will no doubt know of the quality they possess to which I refer. But you will no doubt also understand what I mean when I say it is not at all easy to deem just what this quality is. Incidentally, now that I come to think further about it, it is not quite true to say there was no dispute as to who were the great butlers. What I should have said was that there was no serious dispute among professionals of quality who had any discernment in such matters. Of course, the servants' hall at Darlington Hall, like any servants' hall anywhere, was obliged to receive employees of varying degrees of intellect and perception, and I recall many a time having to bite my lip while some employee, and at times, I regret to say, members of my own stir excitedly eulogized the likes of, say, Mr. Jack Neighbors. I have nothing against Mr. Jack Neighbors, who sadly, I understand, was killed in the war. I mention him simply because his was a typical case. For 2 or 3 years in the mid-30s, Mr. Neighbors' name seemed to dominate conversations in every servants' hall in the land. As I say, at Darlington Hall too, many a visiting employee would bring the latest tales of Mr. Neighbors' achievements, so that I and the likes of Mr. Graham would have to share the frustrating experience of hearing anecdote after anecdote relating to him. And most frustrating of all would be having to witness at the conclusion of each such anecdote otherwise decent employees shaking their heads in wonder and uttering phrases like, "That Mr. Neighbors, he really is the best." Now I do not doubt that Mr. Neighbors had good organizational skills. He did, I understand, mastermind a number of large occasions with conspicuous style. But at no stage did he ever approach the status of a great butler. I could have told you this at the height of his reputation, just as I could have predicted his downfall after a few short years in the limelight. How often have you known it for the butler who is on everyone's lips one day as the greatest of his generation to be proved demonstrably within a few years to have been nothing of the sort? And yet those very same employees who once heaped praise on him will be too busy eulogizing some nougat to stop and examine their sense of judgment. The object of this sort of servants' hall talk is invariably some butler who has come to the fore quite suddenly, through having been appointed by a prominent house, and who has perhaps managed to pull 2 or 3 large occasions with some success. There will then be all sorts of rumors buzzing through servants' halls up and down the country to the effect that he has been approached by this or that personage, or that several of the highest houses are competing for his services with wildly high wages, and what has happened before a few years have passed. This same invincible guy has been held responsible for some blunder, or has for some other reason fallen out of favor with his employers, leaves the house where he came to fame and is never heard of again. Meanwhile, those same gossipers will have found yet some other newcomer about whom to enthuse. Visiting valets, I have found, are often the worst enders, aspiring as they usually do to the position of butler with some urgency. They it is who tend to be always insisting this or that guy is the one to emulate, or repeating what some particular hero is said to have pronounced upon professional matters. But then, of course, I hasten to add, there are many valets who would never dream of indulging in this sort of folly, who are, in fact, professionals of the highest discernment. When 2 or 3 such persons were gathered together at our servants' hall, I mean, of the caliber of, say, Mr. Graham, with whom now, sadly, I seem to have lost touch, we would have some of the most stimulating and intelligent debates on every aspect of our vocation. Indeed, today, those evenings rank amongst my fondest memories from those times. But let me return to the question that is of genuine interest, this question we so enjoyed debating when our evenings were not spoilt by chatter from those who lacked any fundamental understanding of the profession, that is to say, the question, what is a great butler? To the best of my knowledge, for all the talk this question has engendered over the years, there have been very few attempts within the profession to formulate a no-shall answer. The only instance that comes to mind is the attempt of the Hayes Society to devise criteria for membership. You may not be aware of the Hayes Society, for few talk of it these days. But in the 20s and the early 30s, it exerted a considerable influence over much of London and the home counties. In fact, many felt its power had become too great and thought it no bad thing when it was forced to close, I believe in 1932 or 1933. The Hayes Society claimed to admit butlers of only the very RST rank. Much of the power and prestige it went on to gain derived from the fact that, unlike other such organizations which have come and gone, it managed to keep its numbers extremely low, thus giving this claim some credibility. Membership, it was said, never at any point rose above 30 and much of the time remained closer to 9 or 10. This, and the fact that the Hayes Society tended to be a rather secretive body, lent it much mystique for a time, ensuring that the pronouncements it occasionally issued on professional matters were received as though hewn on tablets of stone. But one matter the Society resisted pronouncing on for some time was the question of its own criteria for membership. Pressure to have these announced steadily mounted, and in response to a series of letters published in a quarterly for the Gentleman's Gentleman, the Society admitted that a prerequisite for membership was that an applicant be attached to a distinguished household. Though of course the Society went on, this by itself is far from sufficient to satisfy requirements. It was made clear, furthermore, that the Society did not regard the houses of businessmen or the newly rich as distinguished, and in my opinion this piece of outdated thinking crucially undermined any serious authority the Society may have achieved to arbitrate on standards in our profession. In response to further letters in a quarterly, the Society justed its stance by saying that while it accepted some correspondents' views that certain butlers of excellent quality were to be found in the houses of businessmen, the assumption had to be that the houses of true ladies and gentlemen would not refrain long from acquiring the services of any such persons. One had to be guided by the judgment of the true ladies and gentlemen, argued the Society, or else we may as well adopt the proprieties of Bolshevik Russia. This provoked further controversy, and the pressure of letters continued to build up, urging the Society to declare more fully its membership criteria. In the end, it was revealed in a brief letter to a quarterly that in the view of the society, and I will try and quote accurately from memory, the most crucial criterion is that the applicant be possessed of a dignity in keeping with his position.
In keeping with his
No
position.
applicant will satisfy requirements, whatever his level of accomplishments. Otherwise, if seen to fall short in this respect, for all my lack of enthusiasm for the Hayes Society, it is my belief that this particular pronouncement at least was founded on a significant truth. If one looks at these persons we agree are great butlers, if one looks at, say, Mr. Marshall or Mr. Lane, it does seem to me that the factor which distinguishes them from those butlers who are merely extremely competent is most closely captured by this word dignity. Of course, this merely begs the further question of what is dignity comprised. And it was on this point that the likes of Mr. Graham and I had some of our most interesting debates. Mr. Graham would always take the view that this dignity was something like a woman's beauty, and it was thus pointless to attempt to analyze it. I, on the other hand, held the opinion that to draw such a parallel tended to demean the dignity of the likes of Mr. Marshall. Moreover, my main objection to Mr. Graham's analogy was the implication that this dignity was something one possessed or did not by a youth of nature, and if one did not self-evidently have it, to strive after it would be as futile as an ugly woman trying to make herself beautiful. Now one I would accept that the majority of butlers may well discover ultimately that they do not have the capacity for it. I believe strongly that this dignity is something one can meaningfully strive for throughout one's career. Those great butlers like Mr. Marshall who have it, I am sure, acquired it over many years of self-training and the careful absorbing of experience. In my view, then, it was rather defeatist from a vocational standpoint to adopt a stance like Mr. Graham's. In any case, for all Mr. Graham's skepticism, I can remember he and I spending many evenings trying to put our anus on the constitution of this dignity. We never came to any agreement, but I can say for my part that I developed fairly RM ideas of my own on the matter during the course of such discussions, and they are by and large the beliefs I still hold today. I would like, if I may, to try and say here what I think this dignity to be. You will not dispute, I presume, that Mr. Marshall of Charlevel House and Mr. Lane of Bridewood have been the two great butlers of recent times. Perhaps you might be persuaded that Mr. Henderson of Granbury Castle also falls into this rare category. But you may think me merely biased if I say that my own father could in many ways be considered to rank with such men, and that his career is the one I have always scrutinized for a definition of dignity.
Nope.
Yet
I
it
sent
is
you a
my
link to it. You can just watch it.
conviction that at the peak of his career at Loughborough House,
Yeah.
my father was indeed the embodiment of dignity. I realize that if one looks at the matter objectively, one has to concede my father lacked various attributes one may normally expect in a great butler. But those same absent attributes, I would argue, are every time those of a superficial and decorative order. Attributes that are attractive, no doubt, as icing on the cake, but are not pertaining to what is really essential. I refer to things such as good accent and command of language, general knowledge on wide-ranging topics such as falconing or newt mating, attributes none of which my father could have boasted. Furthermore, it must be remembered that my father was a butler of an earlier generation, who began his career at a time when such attributes were not considered proper, let alone desirable in a butler. The obsessions with eloquence and general knowledge would appear to be ones that emerged with our generation, probably in the wake of Mr. Marshall, when lesser men trying to emulate his greatness mistook the superficial for the essence. It is my view that our generation has been much too preoccupied with the trimmings. Goodness knows how much time and energy has gone into the practicing of accent and command of language, how many hours spent studying encyclopedias and volumes of test your knowledge, when the time should have been spent mastering the basic fundamentals. Though we must be careful not to attempt to deny the responsibility which ultimately lies with ourselves, it has to be said that certain employers have done much to encourage these sorts of Trends. I am sorry to say this, but there would appear to have been a number of houses in recent times, some of the highest pedigree, which have tended to take a competitive attitude towards each other and have not been above showing to guests or butlers mastery of such trivial accomplishments. I have heard of various instances of a butler being displayed as a kind of performing monkey at a house party. In one regrettable case, which I myself witnessed, it had become an established sport in the house for guests to ring for the butler and put to him random questions of the order of, say, who had won the derby in such and such a year, rather as one might to a memory man at the music hall. My father, as I say, came of a generation mercifully free of such confusions of our professional values, and I would maintain that for all his limited command of English and his limited general knowledge, he not only knew all there was to know about how to run a house, he did in his prime come to acquire that dignity in keeping with his position, as the Hayes Society puts it. If I try, then, to describe to you what I believe made my father thus distinguished, I may in this way convey my idea of what dignity is. There was a certain story my father was fond of repeating over the years. I recall listening to him tell it to visitors when I was a child, and then later, when I was starting out as a footman under his supervision. I remember him relating it again the OST time I returned to see him after gaining my OST post as butler to a Mr. and Mrs. Mugridge in their relatively modest house in Alshot, Oxfordshire. Clearly the story meant much to him. My father's generation was not one accustomed to discussing and analyzing in the way ours is, and I believe the telling and retelling of this story was as close as my father ever came to reacting critically on the profession he practiced. As such, it gives a vital clue to his thinking. The story was an apparently true one concerning a certain butler who had travelled with his employer to India and served there for many years, maintaining amongst the natives to the same high standards he had commanded in England. One afternoon, evidently, this butler had entered the dining room to make sure all was well for dinner, when he noticed a tiger languishing beneath the dining table. The butler had left the dining room quietly, taking care to close the doors behind him, and proceeded calmly to the drawing room where his employer was taking tea with a number of visitors. There he attracted his employer's attention with a polite cough, then whispered in the latter's ear, "I'm very sorry, sir, but there appears to be a tiger in the dining room. Perhaps you will permit the 12 balls to be used." And according to legend, a few minutes later, the employer and his guests heard 3 gunshots. When the butler reappeared in the drawing room some time afterwards to refresh the teapots, the employer had inquired if all was well. "Perfectly any, thank you, sir," had come the reply. "Dinner will be served at the usual time, and I am pleased to say there will be no discernible traces left of the recent occurrence by that
No
time."
discernible traces
This last
of the
phrase,
recent
"no
occurrence
discernible traces
by
of the
that
recent
time.
occurrence by that time," my father would repeat with a laugh and shake his head admiringly. He neither claimed to know the butler's name, nor anyone who had known him, but he would always insist the event occurred just as he told it. In any case, it is of little importance whether or not this story is true. The significant thing is, of course, what it reveals concerning my father's ideals. For when I look back over his career, I can see with hindsight that he must have striven throughout his years somehow to become that butler of his story. And in my view, at the peak of his career, my father achieved his ambition. For although I am sure he never had the chance to encounter a tiger beneath the dining table, when I think over all that I know or have heard concerning him, I can think of at least several instances of his displaying in abundance that very quality he so admired in the butler of his story. One such instance was related to me by Mr. David Charles, of the Charles and Reading Company. He visited Darlington Hall from time to time during Lord Darlington's days. It was one evening when I happened to be valeting him. Mr. Charles told me he had come across my father some years earlier while a guest at Loughborough House, the home of Mr. John Silvers, the industrialist, where my Father served 14 years at the height of his career. He had never been quite able to forget my father, Mr. Charles told me, owing to an incident that occurred during that visit. One afternoon, Mr. Charles, to his shame and regret, had allowed himself to become inebriated in the company of two fellow guests. Gentlemen, I shall merely call Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, since they are likely to be still remembered in certain circles. After an hour or so of drinking, these two gentlemen decided they wished to go for an afternoon drive around the local villages, a motor car around this time still being something of a novelty. They persuaded Mr. Charles to accompany them, and since the chauffeur was on leave at that point, enlisted my father to drive the car. Once they had set out, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, for all their being well into their middle years, proceeded to behave like schoolboys, singing coarse songs and making even coarser comments on all they saw from the window. Furthermore, these gentlemen had noticed on the local map 3 villages in the vicinity called Morphy, Saltash, and Bragoon. Now I am not entirely sure these were the exact names, but the point was they reminded Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones of the music hall act, Murphy, Saltman and Bridget the Cat, of which you may have heard. Upon noticing this curious coincidence, the gentleman then gained an ambition to visit the 3 villages in question in honor, as it were, of the music hall artists. According to Mr. Charles, my father had duly driven to one village and was on the point of entering a second when either Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones noticed the village was Bragoon, that is to say the third, not the second, name of the sequence. They demanded angrily that my father turn the car immediately so that the villages could be visited in the correct order. It so happened that this entailed doubling back a considerable way of the route, but, so Mr. Charles assures me, father accepted the request as though it were a perfectly reasonable one, and in general, continued to behave with immaculate courtesy. But Mr. Smith's and Mr. Jones's attention had now been drawn to my father, and no doubt rather bored with what the view outside had to offer, they proceeded to amuse themselves by shouting out unattering remarks concerning my father's mistake. Mr. Charles remembered marveling at how my father showed not one hint of discomfort or anger, but continued to drive with an expression balanced perfectly between personal dignity and readiness to oblige. My father's equanimity was not, however, allowed to last. For when they had wearied of hurling insults at my father's back, the two gentlemen began to discuss their host, that is to say, my father's employer, Mr. John Silvers. The remarks grew ever more debased and treacherous, so that Mr. Charles, at least so he claimed, was obliged to intervene with the suggestion that such talk was bad form. This view was contradicted with such energy that Mr. Charles, quite aside from worrying whether he would become the next focus of the gentleman's attention, actually thought himself in danger of physical assault. But then suddenly, following a particularly heinous insinuation against his employer, my father brought the car to an abrupt halt. It was what happened next that had made such an indelible impression upon Mr. Charles. The rear door of the car opened and my father was observed to be standing there, a few steps back from the vehicle, gazing steadily into the interior. As Mr. Charles described it, all 3 passengers seemed to be overcome as one by the realization of what an imposing physical force my father was. Indeed, he was a man of some 6 feet 3 inches, and his countenance, though reassuring, while one knew he was intent on obliging, could seem extremely forbidding viewed in certain other contexts. According to Mr. Charles, my father did not display any obvious anger. He had, it seemed, merely opened the door. And yet there was something so powerfully rebuking and at the same time so unassailable about his glooming over them that Mr. Charles's 2 drunken companions seemed to cower back like small boys caught by the farmer in the act of stealing apples. My father had proceeded to stand there for some moments, saying nothing, merely holding open the door. Eventually, either Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones had remarked, "Are we not going on with the journey?" My father did not reply, but continued to stand there silently, neither demanding disembarkation nor in any clue as to his desires or intentions. I can well imagine how he must have looked that day, framed by the doorway of the vehicle, his dark, severe presence quite blotting out the heat of the gentle Hertfordshire scenery behind him. Those were, Mr. Charles recalls, strangely unnerving moments during which he too, despite not having participated in the preceding behavior, felt engulfed with guilt. The silence seemed to go on interminably, before either Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones found it in him to mutter, I suppose we were talking a little out of turn there. It won't happen again. A moment to consider this, then my father had closed the door.
No, I'm trying to switch to Dark Souls, but it has a known technical issue.
One of the three villages at all,
So I'm going to see if I can get past it here.
completed thereafter in near silence. Now that I have recalled this episode, another event from around that time in my father's career comes to mind which demonstrates, perhaps even more impressively, this special quality he came to possess. I should explain here that I'm one of two brothers that my older brother, Leonard, was killed during the summer at War while I was still a boy. Naturally, my father would have felt this loss keenly, but to make matters worse, the usual comforter father has in these situations, that is, the notion that his son gave his life gloriously for king and country, was sullied by the fact that my brother had perished in a particularly infamous maneuver. It was alleged that the maneuver had been the most UN British attack.
Why not just say red? I mean, there's no light red, so
that it
there's
had
no
been
orange.
irresponsibly commanded with several outings of elementary military precautions, so
That's
that the
it.
men who had died,
Cool.
brother among them, had died quite needlessly. In view of what
I prefer to be on a controller, but I guess I could play like this.
Maneuver any more precisely, though you may well guess which. What I am alluding to if I say that it caused something of an uproar at the time, adding scientifically to the people between the connectors of all these attacks. There have been calls for the removal.
Yeah, but I might have lost the ability to use my external controller. We'll know after the intro music.
What is less known is that at the close of the Southern African college, this same general had been discreetly retired, and had then entered business, dealing in shipments from Southern. I played this
Of
because
course, I
some
can
10
get
years
the
after the
controller
conflict,
back,
that
so
is,
it's not a problem.
to say when the wounds had been healed and had only superficially healed, my father was called into Mr. John Silver's study to be told that this very same personage, I will call him simply the General, was due to visit for a number of days to attend a house party, during which my father's employer hoped to lay the foundations of a lucrative business transaction. Mr. Silvers, however, remembered the sign of which the visitant had warned my father, and had thus called him in to offer him the option of taking several days leave for the duration of the General's stay. My father's feelings towards the General were, naturally, those of upraised loathing, but he realized too that his employer's
Hey, I thought of a new nickname for you.
aspirations
The Witch of
running a
Israel.
house party, which with some 18 or so people
You got a good
expected
nickname. Your new nickname is the Witch of
my
Israel.
father thus replied to me that while he was most grateful that his feelings had been taken into account, Silvers could be assured that service would be provided to the usual standards. As things turned out, my father's ordeal proved even worse than might have been predicted. For one thing, the ill hopes my father had had to meet the General in person were now the case. Respect or sympathy to them his feelings against him proved with foundations. He moved the rate, and his talk was conspicuous for eagerness to apply military signals to a very wide variety of matters. Worse was to couple the news that the gentleman who threw it, no funny, his usual had installed him. This generated a delicate problem, and I think because guests were all stood about his home. Raising the question as to which guests should be located with him. Hiring for the court. Appreciating his employer's position, volunteered immediately to take the General, and thus was obliged to sue an intimate proximity for all that. the man he detested. Meanwhile, the general, having no idea of my father's feelings, took full opportunity to relate anecdotes of his military as of course many military gentlemen are wont to do to their valets in the privacy of their
Now, there are
Yes, sir.
only embers.
Well, did my father hide his feelings?
A man sees not light, but only
On his
endless
departure, the
lights.
general had actually complimented Mr. John Silvers on the excellence of his butler
living are
and
seen
had left an unusually large tip in appreciation which my father,
of the
without
accursed
hesitation, asked his
dark
employer to donate to a charity. I hope you will agree that in these two instances I have cited from his career, both of which I have corroborated and believed to be accurate, my father not only manifests, but comes close to being fornication itself, of what the Hayes Society terms dignity in keeping with his position.
Dignity in keeping with his position.
My father is such as such as Mr. Jack
The
Neighbors.
dark sign
Even with
brand
the
is
best
the
of his
undead.
technical ourishes, I believe one may begin to distinguish what it is that separates a great butler from a
And in this
really
land,
competent one. We may now understand better, too, why my
undead
father was so fond of the story of the
led
butler
to
who
the
failed to carry on. Discovering a tiger under the dining table, it was because he knew instinctively
Where
that
they are
somewhere in this
locked
story lay the
away
kernel of what true
to await
dignity
the
is.
end of the world.
And let me now posit this: dignity has to do crucially with the butler's ability not to abandon the professional being he inhabits. Lesser butlers will abandon their professional being for the private one at the least provocation. For such persons, being a butler is like playing some pantomime role, a small push, a slight stumble, and the fake it will drop out to reveal the actor underneath. Great butlers are great by virtue of their ability to inhabit their professional inhabited to the utmost. They will not be shaken out by external events, however surprising, alarming or
Thank you, kind sir.
they wear their professionalism as a decent gentleman will wear his suit. He will not let rules or circumstance tear it o' him. In the public gaze,
Or
he will
madam.
discard it when, and do so.
Shut up,
This will
Cortana.
invariably be when he is entirely alone. It is, as I say, a matter of dignity. It is sometimes said that butlers only truly exist in England. Other countries, whatever title is actually used, have only manservants. I tend to believe this is true. Continentals are unable to be butlers because they are as a breed incapable of the emotional restraint which only the English race are capable of. Continentals and by and large the Celts, as you will no doubt agree, are as a rule unable to control themselves in moments of strong emotion, and are thus unable to maintain a professional demeanor other than in the least challenging of situations. If I may return to my earlier metaphor, you will excuse my putting it so coarsely, they are like a man who will, at the slightest provocation, tear off his suit and his shirt out, run about screaming. In a word, dignity is beyond such persons. We English have an important advantage over foreigners in this respect, and it is for this reason that when you think of a great butler, he is bound, almost by definition, to be an Englishman. Of course, you may retort, as did Mr. Graham whenever I expounded such a line during those enjoyable discussions by the way, that if I am correct in what I am saying, one could recognize a great butler as such only after it serving perform under some severe test. And yet the truth is, we accept persons such as Mr. Archer or Mr. Lane to be great, though most of us cannot fail to him under such conditions. I have to admit, Mr. Graham has a point here, but all I can say is that after one has been in the profession as long as one is able to judge intuitively the depth of a man's professionalism without having to see it under pressure. Indeed, on the occasion one is fortunate enough to meet a great butler, far from experiencing any spectacle, but to demand a test. One
Of
has
course.
not to imagine any situation which could ever dislodge a professionalism born with such authority. In fact, I am sure it was an apprehension of this sort, penetrating even the thick haze created by alcohol, which reduced my father's passengers into a shamed silence that Sunday afternoon, many years ago. It is with such men as it is with the English. Landscape seen at its best as I did this morning.
Yeah, it's going good.
Encounters them, one simply knows one is in the presence of greatness. There will always be, I realize, those who would claim that any attempt to analyze greatness as I have been doing is quite futile. You know when somebody's got it and you know when somebody hasn't. Mr. Graham's argument would always be beyond that. There's nothing much you can say. But I believe we have a duty not to be so defeatist in this matter. It is surely a professional responsibility for all of us to think deeply about these things so that each of us may better strive to entertaining dignity for ourselves. Day 2 times morning. Salisbury. Strange beds have rarely agreed with me, and after only a short spell of somewhat troubled slumber, I awoke an hour or so ago. It was then still dark, and knowing I had a full day's motoring ahead of me, I made an attempt to return to sleep. This proved futile, and when I decided eventually to rise, it was still so dark that I was obliged to turn on the electric light in order to shave at the sink in the corner. But when having finished I switched it on again. I could see only daylight at the edges of the curtains. When I parted them just a moment ago, the light outside was still very pale and something of a mist was hitting my view of the baker's shop and chemist's opposite. Indeed, following the street further along to where it runs over the little round-backed bridge, I could see the mist rising from the river, obscuring almost entirely one of the bridge posts. There was not a soul to be seen, and apart from a hammering noise echoing from somewhere distant, and an occasional coughing in a room to the back of the house, there is still no sound to be heard.
But I will today.
The landlady is clearly not yet up and about, suggesting there is little chance of her serving breakfast earlier than her declared time at 7:30. Now, in these quiet moments as I wait for the world about to awake, I ND myself going over in my mind again passages from Miss Kenton's letter. Incidentally, I should before now have explained myself as regards my referring to Miss Kenton. Miss Kenton is properly speaking Mrs. Ben and has been for 20 years. However, because I knew her at close quarters only during her maiden years and have not seen her once since she went to the West Country to become Mrs. Ben, you will perhaps excuse my impropriety in referring to her as I knew her, and in my mind have continued to call her throughout these years. Of course, her letter has given me extra cause to continue thinking of her as Miss Kenton, since it would seem, sadly, that her marriage is now near to come to an end. The letter does not make specific the details of the matter, as one would hardly expect it to do, but Miss Kenton states unambiguously that she has now, in fact, taken the step of moving out of Mr. Ben's house in Helston and is presently lodging with an acquaintance in the nearby village of Little Compton. It is of course tragic that her marriage is now ending in failure. At this very moment, no doubt, she is pondering with regret decisions made in the far past that have now left her, deep in middle age, so alone and desolate. And it is easy to see how in such a frame of mind, the thought of returning to Darlington Hall would be a great comfort to her. Admittedly,
She's
does not at any
deep
point
in
in
this
the letter
middle age and
state
desolate and
explicitly the
isolate.
desire to return, but that is the
No idea what that's like.
message conveyed by the general nuance of many of the passages, imbued as they are with a deep nostalgia for her days at Darlington Hall. Of course, Miss Kenton cannot hope by returning at this stage ever to retrieve those lost years, and it will be my honest duty to impress this upon her when we meet. I will have to point out how strange things are now that the days of working with a grand stir at one's beck and call will probably never return within our lifetime. But then Miss Kenton is an intelligent woman and she will have already realized these things. Indeed, all in all, I cannot see why the option of her returning to Darlington Hall and seeing out her working years there should not all very genuine consolation to a life that has come to be so dominated by a sense of waste. And of course, from my own professional viewpoint, it is clear that even after a break of so many years, Miss Kenton would prove the perfect solution to the problem presently besetting us at Darlington Hall. In fact, By terming it a problem, I perhaps overstate the
No,
matter.
it's locked. What?
I am
Where's the
referring,
key?
after all, to a series of very
Where's the key?
minor errors on my part, and the course I am now pursuing is merely a means of preempting any problems before one arises. It is true. These same trivial errors did cause me some anxiety at honesty, but one, I had time to diagnose them correctly as symptoms of nothing more than a straightforward star shortage. I have refrained from giving them much thought. This contains arrival, as I say, will contain. I intend to. But to return to the letter. It was at times reveal certain discomfort over her present situation, a fact that is rather concerning. She begins one sentence, although I have no idea how I shall use here. And for the remainder of my life, and again, elsewhere, she writes. The rest of my life stretches out as an emptiness before me. Although, most part, as I have said, the tune is one of nostalgia. At one point, for instance, she writes. This whole incident could be reminded how Miss White. Do you? In fact, I hardly imagine you could forget her. For myself, I am still haunted by those vowel sounds and those uniquely ungrammatical sentences only she could dream up. Have you any idea what became of her? I have not, as a matter of fact, though I must say it rather amused me to remember that exasperating housemate who in the end turned out to be one of our most devoted. At another point in her letter, Miss Kenton writes, I was so fond of that view from the second-floor bedrooms, overlooking the lawn with the downs visible in the distance. Is it still like that? On summer evenings there was a sort of magical quality to that view, and I will confess to you now I used to waste many precious minutes standing at one of those windows just enchanted by it. Then she goes on to add, if this is a painful memory, forgive me. But I will never
I
forget
still don't have the key.
that time we both watched your father walking back and forth in front of the summer house, looking down at the ground as though he
Can't imagine ever coming
the
back to
precious
this
jewels he had
place.
dropped there. It is something of a revelation that this memory from over 30 years ago should have remained with Miss Kenton as it has done with me. Indeed, it must have occurred on just one of those summer evenings she mentions, for I can recall distinctly climbing to the second landing and
What's
seeing
that
before me a
noise?
series of orange shafts from the sunset breaking the gloom of the corridor where each bedroom door stood ajar. And as I made my way past those bedrooms, I had seen through a doorway Miss Kenton's her, silhouetted against a window, turn and call softly, Mr. Stevens, if you have a moment. As I entered, Miss Kenton had turned back to the window. Down below, the shadows of the poplars were falling across the lawn. To the right of our view, the lawn sloped up a gentle embankment where the summer house stood, and it was there my father's car could be seen, pacing slowly with an air of preoccupation indeed. As Miss Kenton puts it so well, as though he hoped to ND some precious jewel he had dropped
What's
there.
that noise?
There are some very pertinent reasons why this memory has remained with me, as I wish to explain. Moreover, now that I come to think of it, it is perhaps not so surprising that it should also have made a deep impression on Miss Kenton given certain aspects of her relationship with my father during her early days at Darlington Hall. Miss Kenton and my father had arrived at the house at more or less the same time, that is to say, the spring of 1922, as a consequence of my losing at one stroke the previous housekeeper and under butler. This had occurred due to these latter two persons deciding to marry one another and leave the profession. I have always found such liaisons a serious threat to the order in a house. Since that time, I have lost numerous more employees in such circumstances. Of course, one is to expect such things to occur amongst maids and footmen, and a good butler should always take this into account in his planning, but such marrying amongst more senior employees can have an extremely disruptive effect on work. Of course, if two members of STA happen to fall in love and decide to marry, it would be churlish to be apportioning blame, but what I ND a major irritation are those persons, and housekeepers are particularly guilty here, who have no genuine commitment to their profession. and who are essentially going from post to post looking for
for romance.
This sort of person is a blight on good professionalism. But let me say immediately, I do not have Miss Kenton in mind at all when I say this. Of course, she too eventually left Meister to get married, but I can vouch that during the time she worked as housekeeper under me, she was nothing less than dedicated and never allowed her professional priorities to be distracted. But I am digressing. I was explaining that we had fallen in need of a housekeeper and an under-butler at one and the same time, and Miss Kenton had arrived with unusually good references, I recall, to take up the former post. As it happened, my father had around
I should rest at a
this time come to the
bonfire.
end of his distinguished service at Loughborough House with the death of his employer, Mr. John Silvers, and had been at something of a loss for work and accommodation. Although
I'm
he
gonna
was still,
figure this
of
out.
course,
I'm
a
gonna solve the
professional.
mystery.
The highest class, he was now in his 70s and much ravaged by arthritis and other ailments. It was not at all certain, then, how he would fare against the younger breed of highly professionalized butlers looking for posts. In view of this, it seemed a reasonable solution to ask my father to bring his great experience and distinction to Darlington for. As I remember, it was one morning a little while after my father and Miss Kenton had joined the study. I had been in my pantry, sitting at the table doing my paperwork, when a fellow knock on my door. I recall I was a little taken aback when Miss Kenton opened the door and entered before I had bidden her to do so. She came in holding a large vase of owls and said with a smile, "Mr. Stevens, I thought these would brighten your parlor a little." "I beg your pardon, Miss Kenton. It seems such a pity your room should be so dark and cold, Mr. Stevens, when it's such bright sunshine outside. I thought
I feel like I'm gonna die.
you'd enliven things a little." "That's very kind of you, Miss Kenton. It's a shame more sun doesn't get in here. The walls are even a little damp, are they not, Mr. Stevens?" I turned back to my accounts, saying, "Merely condensation,
Yeah?
I believe, Miss Kenton." She put her vase down on the table in front of me, then glancing around my pantry again said, "If you wish, Mr.
I feel like I'm
Stevens,
gonna
I might
die.
put in some more cuttings for you." "Miss Kenton, I appreciate your kindness, but this is not a room of entertainment. I am happy to have distractions kept to a minimum. But surely, Mr. Stevens, there is no need to keep your room so stark and bereft of color. It has served me perfectly well thus far as it is, Miss Kenton. Though I appreciate your thoughts. In fact, since you are here, there was a certain matter I wished to raise with you." "Oh, really, Mr. Stevens?" "Yes, Miss Kenton, just a small matter. I happened to be walking past the kitchen yesterday when I heard you calling to someone named William. Is that so, Mr. Stevens?" "Indeed, Miss Kenton. I did hear you call several times for William. May I ask who it was you were addressing by that name?" "Why, Mr. Stevens, I should think I was addressing your father. There are no other Williams in this house, I take it." "It's an easy enough error to have made," I said with a small smile. "May I ask you in future, Miss Kenton, to address my father as Mr. Stevens? If you are speaking of him to a third party, then you may wish to call him Mr. Stevens Sr. to distinguish him from myself." "I'm most grateful, Miss Kenton." With that I turned back to my papers. But to my surprise, Miss Kenton did not take her leave. "Excuse me, Mr. Stevens," she said.
You, give me stuff.
"Yes, Miss Kenton.
What is
I
it
am
want?
afraid I am not quite clear what you are saying. I have in the past been accustomed to addressing under servants by their Christian names and saw no reason to do otherwise in this house. A most understandable error. Miss Kenton, however, if you will consider the situation for a moment, you may come to see the inappropriateness of someone such as yourself talking down to one such as my father. I am still not clear what you are getting at, Mr. Stevens. You say someone such as myself, but I am, as far as I understand, the housekeeper of this house, while your father is the under butler.
He is of course entitled the under butler, as you say. But I am surprised your powers of observation have not already made it clear to you that he is in reality more than that. A great deal more. No doubt I have been extremely unobservant, Mr. Stevens. I had only observed that your father was an able under butler and addressed him accordingly. It must indeed have been most galling for him to be so addressed by one such as I. Miss Kenton, it is clear from your tone you simply have not observed my father. If you had done so, the inappropriateness of someone of your age and standing addressing him as William should have been self-evident to you. Mr. Stevens, I may not have been a housekeeper for long, but I would say that in the time I have been, my abilities have attracted some very generous remarks. I do not doubt your competence for one moment, Miss Kenton. But 100 things should have indicated to you that my father is a girl of unusual distinction from whom you may learn a wealth.
Maybe I shouldn't have
Things
used
were
that
prepared to be more
humanity.
observant. I am most indebted to you for your
Oh,
advice,
and I lost it
Mr.
when I
Stevens.
died.
So do. Please tell me, just what marvelous things might I learn from observing your father?
Give me.
I would have thought it obvious to anyone with eyes, Miss Kenton. But we have already established, have we not, that I am particularly deficient in that respect. Miss Kenton, if you are under the impression you have already at your age perfected yourself, you will never rise to the heights you are no doubt capable of. I might point out, for instance, you are still often unsure of what goes where and which item is which. This seemed to take the wind out of Miss Kenton's sails somewhat. Indeed, for a moment, she looked a little upset. Then she said, I had a little difficulty on RST arriving, but that is surely only normal. Ah, there you are, Miss Kenton. If you had observed my father, who arrived in the house a week after he did, you will have seen that his house knowledge is perfect and was so almost from the time he set foot in Darlington Hall. Miss Kenton proceeded to think about this before saying a little sulkily, I am sure Mr. Stevens Sr. is very good at his job, but I assure you, Mr. Stevens, I am very good at mine. I will remember to address your father by his full title in future. Now, if you would please excuse me. After this encounter, Miss Kenton did not attempt to introduce further hours into my pantry, and in general, I was pleased to
You drop it, Dark.
observe she went about settling in impressively. It was clear. Furthermore, she was a housekeeper who took her work very seriously, and in spite of her youth she seemed to have no difficulty gaining the respect of her staff. That she was indeed proceeding to address my father as Mr. Stevens. However, one afternoon, perhaps 2 weeks after our conversation in my pantry, I was doing something in the library when Miss Kenton came in and said, Excuse me, Mr. Stevens, but if you are searching for your dustpan, it is out in the hall. I beg your pardon, Miss Kenton. Your dustpan, Mr. Stevens.
Not sure
You
what it
left it
was.
out here. Shall I bring it in for you? Miss Kenton, I have not been using a dustpan. Ah, well, then forgive me, Mr. Stevens. I naturally assumed you were using your dustpan and had left it out in the hall. I am sorry to have disturbed you. She started to leave, but then turned at the doorway and said, Oh, Mr. Stevens. I would return it myself, but I have to go upstairs.
In the
Just now.
ancient legends,
I wonder
it is
if you will
stated
remember it. Of course, Miss Kenton.
that one day an
Thank you for drawing
undead shall
attention
be
to it.
chosen.
It is quite all right, Mr. Stevens.
Yep.
I listened to her footsteps cross the hall and start up the great
To
staircase,
leave the
then
undead
proceeded to the doorway
asylum
myself.
in pilgrimage
From the library doors, one has an unbroken
to the
view right
land
across
of
the
the
entrance
ancient
hall to
lords.
the main doors of TH most conspicuously, in virtually the central
Lord
spot otherwise empty and highly polished or lay the upon Miss Kenton had alluded to. It struck me as a trivial, but irritating error. The dustpan would have been conspicuous not only from the VE ground door, doorways opening onto the hall, but also from the staircase and the RSTO balconies. I crossed the hall and had actually picked up the ending item before realizing its full implication. My father, I recalled, had been brushing the entrance hall a half hour or so earlier. At RST, I found it hard to credit such an error to my father. But I soon reminded myself that such trivial slips are liable to befall anyone from time to time, and my irritation soon turned to Miss Kenton for attempting to create such unwarranted fuss over the incident. Then, not more than a week later, I was coming down the back corridor from the kitchen when Miss Kenton came out of her parlor and uttered a statement she had clearly been rehearsing. This was something to be that although she felt most uncomfortable drawing my attention to errors made by Meister, she and I had to work as a team, and she felt I would not feel inhibited to do. Similarly, should I notice errors made by females too. She then went on to point out that several pieces of silver had been laid out for the lighting clearly college. The end of one fall.
Oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that.
Black. I thanked her
Because
she
these
rolled
skeletons
back
are gonna kill me and I'll lose
into her
everything.
parlor. It had been unnecessary, of course, for her to mention that the silver was one of my father's main responsibilities.
Oh
And
wow.
one he took great
Goodbye,
pride in.
humanity.
It
What
is
are you
very
trying to
possible
remind
that
us of? Our lost
humanity? Thought which I have now forgotten. In any case, I recall things reaching something of a climax one grey and drizzly afternoon when I was in the billiard room attending to Lord Darlington's sporting trophies. Miss Kenton had entered and said from the door, "Mr. Stevens, I have just noticed something outside which puzzles me."
Maybe I won't
What is
get that
that,
stupid
Miss
big
Kenton?
sword right now.
Was it
Wait
his
till I die
lordship's
of
wish that the
natural
Chinaman on the
causes.
upstairs landing should be exchanged with the one outside this door? The Chinaman, Miss Kenton.
No, I'm just about to get murdered by
Mr.
skeletons
Stevens.
because I'm too tempted to go
The
get
Chinaman
weapons.
normally on the landing you will now empty outside this door. I think, Miss Kenton, that you are a little confused. I do not believe I am confused at all, Mr. Stevens. I make it right. Business to acquaint myself with where objects properly belong in a house.
That's true.
The Chinamen, I would suppose, were polished by someone, then replaced incorrectly. If you are skeptical, Mr. Stevens, perhaps you will care to step out here and observe for
I think I'm
yourself.
just gonna leave the
Miss
big
Kenton,
sword for
I am
later.
occupied at
I'll be back
present.
to get it later.
But, Mr. Stevens, you do not appear to believe what I am saying. I am thus asking you to step outside this door and see for yourself. Miss Kenton, I am busy just now and will attend to the matter shortly.
I never said I didn't want to play, I just said I don't want to go fight the skeletons when I have so much humanity. I have too much to lose.
I will accept nothing of the sort, Miss Kenton, until I have had a chance to deal with the matter. However, I am occupied at present. I turned back to my business, but Miss Kenton remained in the doorway observing me. Eventually, she said, "I think we will be finished very shortly, Mr. Stevens. I will await you outside so that this matter may be analyzed when you come out. Miss Kenton, I believe you are according this matter an urgency it hardly merits." But Miss Kenton had departed, and sure enough, as I continued with my work, an occasional footstep or some other sound would serve to remind me she was still there outside the door. I decided,
I
therefore,
thought
to
there was a
occupy
maze at
myself
the
with
beginning,
some
but I
further
keep
tasks
being
in the
unable
billiard
to find it.
room, assuming she would after a
Very
while see the
frustrating.
ludicrousness of her position and leave. However, after some time had passed, and I had exhausted the tasks which could usefully be achieved with the implements I happened to have at hand, Miss Kenton was evidently still outside. Resolved not to waste further time on account of this childish act, I contemplated departure via the French windows. A drawback to this plan was the weather, that is to say, several large puddles and patches of mud were in evidence, and the fact that one would need to return to the billiard room again at some point to bolt the French windows from the inside. Eventually, then, I decided the best strategy would be simply to stride out of the room very suddenly at a furious pace. I thus made my way as quietly as possible to a position from which I could execute such a rush, and, clutching my implements I about me, succeeded in propelling myself through the doorway and several paces down the corridor, before a somewhat astonished Miss Kenton could recover her wits. This she did, however, rather rapidly, and the next moment I found
She had overtaken me and was standing before me, actively barring my way. Mr. Stevens, that is the incorrect Chinaman, would you not agree? Miss Kenton, I am very busy. I am surprised you have nothing better to do than stand in corridors all day. Mr. Stevens, is that the correct Chinaman or is it not? Miss Kenton, I would ask you to keep your voice down. And I would ask you, Mr. Stevens, to turn around and look at that.
Look at the Chinaman.
Chinaman. Miss Kenton, keep your voice down. What would employees below think to hear us shouting at the top of our voices about what is and what is not the correct Chinaman? The fact is, Mr. Stevens, all the Chinamen in this house have been dirty for some time. They are in incorrect positions. Miss Kenton, you are being quite ridiculous. Now if you will be so good as to let me pass. Mr. Stevens, will you kindly look at the Chinaman behind you? If it is so important to you, Miss Kenton, I will allow that the Chinaman behind me may well be incorrectly situated. But I must say I have some loss as to why you should be so concerned with these most trivial of errors. These errors may be trivial in themselves, Mr. Stevens, but you must yourself realize their larger significance. Understand? Now if you would kindly allow me to pass. The fact is,
Guess I can go get the sword
your
now.
father is entrusted with far more than a man of his age can cope with. Miss Kenton, you clearly have little idea of what you are suggesting. Whatever your father was once, Mr. Stevens, his powers are now greatly diminished. This is what these trivial errors, as you call them, really signify, and if you do not heed them, it will not be long before your father commits an error of major proportions. Miss Kenton, you are merely making yourself look foolish. I am sorry, Mr. Stevens, but I must go on. I believe there are many duties your father should now be relieved of. He should not, for one, be asked to go on carrying heavily laden trays. The way his hands tremble as he carries them into dinner is nothing short of alarming. It is surely only a matter of time before a tray falls from his hands onto a lady or gentleman's lap. And furthermore, Mr. Stevens, and I am very sorry to say this, I have noticed your father's nose. Have you indeed, Miss Kenton? I regret to say I have, Mr. Stevens. For last I watched your father proceeding very slowly towards the dining room with his tray, and I am afraid I observed clearly a large drop on the end of his nose dangling over the soup bowls. I would not call such a kind of eating a great stimulant to appetite. But now that I think further about it, I am not sure Miss Kenton spoke quite so boldly that day. We did, of course, over the years and working closely together come to have some very frank exchanges. But the afternoon I am recalling was still early in our relationship. And I cannot see even Miss Kenton having been so forward. I am not sure she could actually have gone so far as to say things like, these errors may be trivial in themselves, but you must yourself realize their larger significance. In fact, now that I come to think of it, I have a feeling it may have been more done into him than me. A particular remark to me that time he called me into his study. Some 2 months after that exchange with Miss Kenton outside the billiard room. By that time, the situation as regards my father had changed significantly following his fall. The study doors are those that face one as one comes down the great staircase. There is outside the study today a glass cabinet, displaying various of Mr. Faraday's ornaments, but throughout the world. Long in these days, there stood a black spotted bookshelf containing many volumes of encyclopedia, including a complete set of the Britannica. It was a joy of Lord Darlington's to stand at this shelf, studying the spines of the encyclopedias as I came down the staircase, and sometimes, to increase the effect of an accidental meeting, he would actually pull out a volume and pretend to be engrossed as I completed my descent. Then, as I passed him, he would say, "Oh, Stephen, there was something I meant to say to you." And with that, he would wander back into his study, all appearances still thoroughly engrossed in the volume held open in his hands. It was invariably embarrassment at what he was about to impart which made Lord Darlington adopt such an approach, and even once the study door was closed behind us, he would often stand by the window and make a show of consulting the encyclopedia throughout our conversation. What I am now describing, incidentally, is one of many instances I could relate to which underline Lord Darlington's essentially shy and modest nature. A great deal of nonsense has been spoken and written in recent years concerning his lordship and the prominent role he came to play in great airs, and some utterly ignorant reports have had it that he was motivated by egotism or else arrogance. Let me say here that nothing could be further from the truth. It was completely contrary to Lord Darlington's natural tendencies to take such public stances as he came to do, and I felt with conviction that his lordship was persuaded to become his retiring side only through a deep sense of moral duty. Whatever may be said about his lordship these days, and the great majority of it is, as I say, utter nonsense, I can declare that he was a truly good man at heart, a gentleman through and through, and one I am today proud to have given my best years of service to. On the particular afternoon to which I am referring, his lordship would still have been in his mid-50s, but as I recall, his hair had grayed entirely, and his tall slender girl already bore signs of the stoop that was to become so pronounced in his last years. He barely asked, "Your father feeling better now, Stevens?" "I'm glad to say he has made a full recovery, sir." "Jolly
I
pleased
forgot
to
to
hear
get the
that."
sword.
"Jolly pleased." "Thank you, sir." "Look here, Stevens, have there been any well signs at all?" "I mean signs to tell us your father may be wishing his burden lightened somewhat. Apart from this business of him falling, I mean, as I say, sir, my father appears to have made a full recovery, and I believe he is still a person of considerable dependability. It is true, one or two errors have been noticeable recently in the discharging of his duties, but these are in every case very trivial in nature. But none of us wish to see anything of that sort happen ever again, do we? I mean, your father collapsing and all that. Indeed not, sir. And it can happen out on the lawn, it could happen anywhere, and at any time. Yes, sir. It could happen, say, during dinner while your father was waiting at table. It is possible, sir. Look here, Stevens, the RST of the delegates will be arriving here in less than a fortnight. We are well prepared, sir. What happens within this house after that may have considerable repercussions. Yes, sir. I mean considerable repercussions on the whole course Europe is taking. In view of the persons who will be present, I do not think I exaggerate. No, sir. Hardly the time for taking on avoidable hazards. It is not, sir. Look here, Stevens, there's no question of your father leaving us. You're simply being asked to reconsider his duties. And it was then, I believe, that his lordship said as he looked down again into his volume and awkwardly rudimentary, these errors may be trivial in themselves, but you must yourself realize their larger significance. Your father's days of dependability are now passing. He must not be asked to perform tasks in any area where error might jeopardize the success of our forthcoming conference. Indeed not, sir. I fully understand. Good. I'll leave you to think about it then, Stevens. Lord Darlington, I should say, had actually witnessed my father's ball of a week or so earlier. His lordship had been entertaining two guests, a young lady and gentleman, in the summer house, and had watched my father's approach across the lawn bearing a much welcome tray of refreshments. The lawn climbs a slope several yards in front of the summer house, and in those days, as today, flagstones embedded into the grass served as steps by which to negotiate this climb. It was in the vicinity of these steps that my father fell, scattering the load on his tray, teapot, cups, saucers, sandwiches, cakes across the area of grass at the top of the steps. By the time I had received the alarm and gone out, his lordship and His guests had laid my father on his side, a cushion and a rug from the summer house serving as pillow and blanket. My father was unconscious and his face looked an oddly grey colour. Dr. Meredith had already been sent for, but his lordship was of the view that my father should be moved out of the sun before the doctor's arrival. Consequently, a bath chair arrived and with not a little difficulty, my father was transported into the house. By the time Dr. Meredith arrived, he had revived considerably and the doctor soon left again, making only vague statements to the effect that my father had perhaps been overworking. The whole episode was clearly a great embarrassment to my father, and by the time of that conversation in Lord Darlington's study, he had long since returned to busying himself as much as ever. The question of how one could broach the topic of reducing his responsibilities was not, then, an easy one. My difficulty was further compounded by the fact that for some years my father and I had tended, for some reason I have never really fathomed, to converse less and less. So much so that after his arrival at Darlington Hall, even the brief exchanges necessary to communicate information relating to work took place in an atmosphere of mutual embarrassment. In the end, I judged the best option to be to talk in the privacy of his room, thus giving him the opportunity to ponder his new situation in solitude once I took my leave. The only times my father could be found in his room were first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Choosing the former, I climbed up to his small attic room at the top of the servants' wing early one morning and knocked gently. I had rarely had reason to enter my father's room prior to this occasion, and I was newly struck by the smallness and starkness of it. Indeed, I recall my impression at the time was of having stepped into a prison cell, but then this might have had as much to do with the pale early light as with the size of the room or the bareness of its walls. For my father had opened his curtains and was sitting, shaved and in full uniform, on the edge of his bed from where evidently he had been watching his fight home to dawn. At least one assumed he had been watching the sky, there being little else to view from his small window other than roof tiles and guttering. The oil lamp beside his bed had been extinguished, and when I saw my father glance disapprovingly at the lamp I had brought to guide me up the rickety staircase, I quickly lowered the wick. Having done this, I noticed all the more vividly the pale light coming into the room and the way it lit up the edges of my father's craggy, still awesome feet. Ah, I said, and gave a short laugh. I might have known father would be up and ready for the day. I've been up for the past 3 hours, he said, looking me up and down rather coldly. I hope father is not being kept awake by his arthritic troubles. I get all the sleep I need. My father reached forward to the only chair in the room, a small wooden one, and placing both hands on its back, brought himself to his feet. When I saw him stood upright before me, I could not be sure to what extent he was hunched over due to enmity and what extent due to the habit of accommodating the steeply sloped ceilings of the room. I have come here to relate something to you, father. Then related briefly and concisely. I haven't all morning to listen to you chatter. In that case, father, I will come straight to the point. Come to the point then and be done with it. Some of us have work to be getting on with. Very well. Since you wish me to be brief, I will do my best to comply. The fact is, father has become increasingly in so much, so that even the duties of an under-butler are now beyond his capabilities. His lordship is of the view, as indeed I am myself, that while father is allowed to continue with his present round of duties, he represents an ever-present threat to the smooth running of this household, and in particular to next week's important international gathering. My father's face, in the half-light, betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Principally, I continued, it has been felt that father should no longer be asked to wait at table, whether or not guests are present. I have waited at table every day for the last 4 years, my father remarked, his voice perfectly unhurried. Furthermore, it has been decided that father should not carry laden trays of any sort for even the shortest distances. In view of these limitations, and knowing father's esteem for conciseness, I have listed here the revised round of duties he will from now on be expected to perform. I felt disinclined actually to hand to him the piece of paper I was holding, and so put it down on the end of his bed. My father glanced at it and returned his gaze to me. There was still no trace of emotion discernible in his expression, and his hands on the back of the chair appeared perfectly relaxed. Hunched over or not, it was impossible not to be reminded of the sheer impact of his physical presence, the very same that had once reduced two drunk gentlemen to sobriety in the back of the car. Eventually, he said, I only fell that time because of those steps. They're crooked. Seamus should be told to put those right before someone else does the same thing. Indeed. In any case, may I be assured father will study that sheet. Seamus should be told to put those steps right. Certainly before these gentlemen start arriving from Europe. Indeed. Well, father, good morning. That summer evening referred to by Miss Kenton in her letter came very soon after that encounter. It may have been the evening of that same day. I cannot remember just what purpose had taken me up onto the top floor of the house to where the row of guest bedrooms line the corridor. But as I think I have said already,
What the heck?
I can recall vividly the way the last of the daylight was coming through each open doorway and falling across the corridor in orange shafts. As I walked on past those unused bedrooms, Miss Kenton's a silhouette against a window within one of them had called to me. When one thinks about it, when one remembers the way Miss Kenton had repeatedly spoken to me of my father during those early days of her time at Darlington Hall, it is little wonder that the memory of that evening should have stayed with her all of these years. No doubt, she was feeling a certain sense of guilt of the two of us watched from our window my father stood down below. The shadows of the poplar trees had fallen across much of the lawn, but the sun was still lighting up the far corner where the grass sloped up to the summer house. My father could be seen standing by those four slow steps, taking course. The breeze was slightly disturbed.
What a cunt.
Then, as we watched, he walked very slowly up the steps. At the top, he turned and came back down, a little faster. Turning once more, my father became still again for several seconds, contemplating the steps before him. Eventually, he climbed the rope. A second time, very deliberately. This time he continued on across the grass until he had almost reached the summer house, then turned and came walking slowly back, his eyes never leaving the ground. In fact, I can describe his manner at that moment no better than the way Miss Kenton put it in her letter. It was indeed as though he hoped to envy some precious jewel he had dropped there. But I see I am becoming preoccupied with these memories, and this is perhaps a little foolish. This present trip represents, after all, a rare opportunity for me to savor to the full the many splendors of the English countryside, and I know I shall greatly regret it later if I allow myself to become unduly diverted. In fact, I notice I have yet to record here anything of my journey to this city aside from mentioning brief that halt on the hillside road at the very start of it. Yesterday's motoring. I had planned the journey here to Salisbury with considerable care, avoiding almost entirely the major roads. The route might have seemed unnecessarily circuitous to some, but then it was one that enabled me to take in a fair number of the sites recommended by Mrs. J. Simmons in her excellent volumes, and I must say I was well pleased with it. For much of the time it took me through farmland, amidst the pleasant aroma of meadows, and often I found myself slowing before to a crawl to better appreciate a stream or a valley I was passing. But as I recall, I did not actually disembark again until I was quite near Salisbury. On that occasion, I was moving down a long, straight road with wide meadows on either side of me. In fact, the land had become very open and at that point, enabling one to see a considerable distance in all directions, and the spire of Salisbury Cathedral had become visible on the skyline up ahead. A tranquil mood had come over me, and for this reason I believe I was again motoring very slowly, probably at no more than 15 miles per hour. This was just as well, for I saw only just in time a hen crossing my path in the most leisurely manner. I brought the Ford to a halt only a foot or two from the fowl, which in turn ceased its journey, pausing there in the road in front of me. When after a moment it had not moved, I resorted to the car horn, but this had no effect other than to make the creature commence picking at something on the ground. Rather exasperated, I began to get out and had one foot still on the running board when I heard a woman's voice call, "Oh, I do beg your pardon, sir." Glancing round, I saw I had just passed on the roadside a farm
Oh my gosh, am I in an unwinnable position?
Her attention, no doubt aroused by the horn, had come running. Passing me, she swooped up the hen in her arms and proceeded
Oh, she was lucky.
apologized to me again. When I assured her no harm had been done, she said, "I do thank you for stopping and not running poor Nellie over. She's a good girl, provides us with the largest eggs you've ever seen. It's so good of you to stop. And you were probably in a hurry too." "Oh, I'm not in a hurry at all," I said with a smile. For the rest time in many a year, I'm able to take my time, and I must say, it's rather an enjoyable experience. I'm just motoring for the pleasure of it, you see. "Oh, that's nice, sir. And you're on your way to Salisbury, I expect."
This could be
"I am
difficult.
indeed. In fact, that's the cathedral we can see over there, isn't it? I'm told it's a splendid building."
Okay.
"Oh, it is, sir. It's very nice." Well, to tell you the truth, I hardly go into Salisbury myself, though I couldn't really say what it's like at close quarters. But I tell you, sir, day in day out we have a view of the cathedral from here. Some days, it's too misty and it's like it's vanished altogether. But you can see for yourself, on any day like this, it's a nice sight. Delightful. I'm so grateful you didn't run over our Nellie, sir. 3 years ago, a tortoise of ours got killed like that, and on just about this very spot. We were all very upset over that. "How very tragic," I said, somberly. "Oh, it was, sir. Some people say we farm people get used to animals being hurt or killed, but that's just not true." My little boy cried for days. "It's so good you stopped for Nellie, sir. If you'd care to come in for a cup of tea, now that you've got out and everything, you'd be most welcome. It would set you on your way." "That's most kind, but really, I feel I should continue. I'd like to reach Salisbury in good time to take a look at the city's many." "Indeed, sir. Well, thank you again." I said "oh" again, maintaining for some reason, perhaps because I expected further farm creatures to wander across my path my slow speed as before. I must say, something about this small encounter had put me in very good spirits. The simple kindness I had been thankful, and the simple kindness I had been aired in return, caused me somehow to feel exceedingly uplifted about the whole enterprise facing me in these coming days. It was in such a mood, then, that I proceeded here to Salisbury. But I feel I should return just a moment to the matter of my father, for it strikes me I may have given the impression earlier that I treated him rather bluntly over his declining abilities. The fact is, there was little choice but to approach the matter as I did, as I am sure you will agree once I have explained the full context of those days. That is to say, the important international conference to take place at Darlington Hall was by then looming ahead of us, leaving little room for indulgence or beating about the bush. It is important to be reminded, moreover, that although Darlington Hall was to witness many events of property and
No, you did not. No. Fourth Taurus.
One supposes,
I didn't
relatively
know he was that
inexperienced
quick.
and inclined to leave little to chance. In fact, I often look back to that conference, and, for more than one reason, regard it as a turning point in my life. For one thing, I suppose I do regard it as the moment in my career when I truly came of age as a butler. That is not to say I consider I became, necessarily, a great butler. It is hardly for me, in any case, to make judgments of this sort. But should it be that anyone ever wished to posit that I have attained at least a little of that crucial quality of dignity in the course of my career, such a person may wish to be directed towards that conference of March 1923 as representing the moment when IRST demonstrated I might have a capacity for such a quality. It was one of those events which, at a crucial stage in one's development, arrived to challenge and stretch one to the limit of one's ability and beyond, so that thereafter one has new standards by which to judge oneself. That conference was also memorable, of course, for other quite separate reasons, as I would like now to explain. The conference of 1923 was the culmination of long planning on the part of Lord Darlington. Indeed, in retrospect, one can see clearly how his lordship had been moving towards this point from some 3 years or so before. As I recall, he had not been initially so preoccupied with the peace treaty when it was drawn up at the end of the Great War, and I think it is fair to say that his interest was prompted not so much by an analysis of the treaty, but by his friendship with Herr Karl-Heinz Wickel. Herr RST visited Darlington Hall very shortly after the war while still in his OSIS uniform, and it was evident to any observer that he and Lord Darlington had struck up a close friendship. It did not surprise me, at a glance, that Herr Bremen was a gentleman of great decency. He returned again, having left the German army at fairly regular intervals during the following 2 years, and one could not help noticing with some alarm the deterioration he underwent from one visit to the next. His clothes became increasingly impoverished, his frame thinner, a hunted look appeared in his eye, and on his last visits, he would spend long periods staring into space, oblivious of his lordship's presence or, sometimes, even of having been addressed. I would have concluded Herr Bremen was suing from some serious illness, but for certain remarks his lordship made at that.
Why does that one always go
assuring me this was
forward?
not
That's a
so.
maybe that's a
It must
club
have been towards the end of 1920 that Lord Darlington made the RST of a number of trips to Berlin himself, and I can remember the profound effect it had on him. A heavy earth preoccupation hung over him 4 days after his return, and I recall once, in reply to my inquiring how he had enjoyed his trip,
It's the court tour.
Stevens. Deeply disturbing. It let us wait. It's credit to treat a defeated fool like this. A complete break with the traditions of this country. But there is another memory that has remained with me very vividly in relation to this matter. Today, the old banqueting hall normally contains a table and a spacious room with its high up magnificent ceiling, serves Mr. Faraday well as a sort of gallery. But, in his lordship's day, the rooms regularly required, as was his long table that occupied it, to seat 30 or more guests for dinner. In fact, the banqueting hall is so spacious that when necessity demanded it, further tables were added to the existing one to enable almost everyone to be seated. On normal days, of course, Lord Darlington took his meals, of what is typically day-to-day, in the building atmosphere of the dining room, which is ideal for accommodating 2,000. But on that particular winter's night I am recollecting, the dining room was for some reason, and Darlington was dining with a solitary guest by the name of his son, Chief Fox, a colleague from his lordship's foreign estate. The vastness of the banqueting hall. You will no doubt agree that the hardest of situations as regards dinner to return never just two diners present. I would myself much prefer to meet on just one diner, even if he were a total stranger. It is rarely much the who is present, even when one of them is one in their employer. But one ending makes it most difficult to achieve that balance between
Attentiveness and the illusion of absolute essential to good. Waiting, it is in this situation that one is wary free of suspicion. If one's presence seems pivoting the conversation. On that occasion, much of the women in the office were the two gentlemen who were sitting side by side midway down the table, it being much too broad to allow them to.
That was actually kind of a fun moment to end on. It would have been satisfying to see the Ford Taurus like disappear into like, you know, sparkly whiteness, but you basically got a good dose of the Ford Taurus. Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. I hope that you guys always keep dignity in keeping with your position. Thanks for swinging by. I have been your host, Sebastian St. Seraphine, Speed Demon, Souls Like Smalls. Catch you guys on the flip side. Okay, bye. How do I do this? Gotta go. Oh, I'm still here. Fine. Okay, third time's the charm. Here, video capture. Okay, bye. There we go. Hate when that happens. Catch you guys on the flip side.